The Great Silence. The sky above New York, London, and Tokyo did not turn black all at once. It was a creeping, suffocating gray that eventually swallowed the sun. In the first few months, the golden skyscrapers of the old world became nothing more than hollow monuments to a dead economy. Millions waited for a rescue that would never come because the very engines of the world had seized. But while the northern giants froze in their tracks, a new pulse began to beat in the forgotten corners of the globe. Somewhere in the highland plateaus and the deep southern latitudes, lights were still flickering on. The crown of the world was slipping, and someone else was reaching for it. Introduction: The Fragility of Giants. For centuries, the definition of a superpower was built on high-tech infrastructure, complex financial systems, and globalized supply chains. However, these pillars proved to be made of glass. When the atmosphere became choked with volcanic ash or the fallout of a global event, the very things that made the old powers great became their downfall. High-density cities turned into traps without imported food. Advanced technology became useless without a functioning power grid. The world was suddenly thrust back into a fundamental reality where power was not measured in digital currency, but in calories, fresh water, and the ability to breathe. This narrative examines the structural collapse of the traditional leaders and the unexpected emergence of the new sovereigns of Earth. The turning point: the ash and the soil. As the global temperature dropped and traditional breadbaskets in the northern hemisphere failed, the geopolitical chessboard was violently cleared. The nations that survived were not those with the most aircraft carriers, but those with the most resilient geography. Countries located in equatorial regions or specific southern latitudes found themselves shielded by unique atmospheric currents. While the old world was buried under a permanent winter, these regions maintained the semblance of a growing season. The shift was brutal and swift. Wealthy nations tried to buy their way out of the crisis, but money has no value when there is no surplus to sell. The power of the grain silo replaced the power of the stock exchange. Rising from the dust, the self-sufficient sovereigns. In this new era, nations like Brazil, parts of Southeast Asia, and specific African highlands began to realize their accidental advantage. These were territories that had spent decades developing domestic agriculture and local resource extraction. Because they were less dependent on the hyper-complex, just-in-time delivery systems of the West, they did not collapse when the shipping lanes went silent. They became islands of stability in a sea of global chaos. The new leaders emerged as providers. A nation that can feed its people and still have a surplus becomes an instant magnet for the world's remaining talent and resources. We see the rise of the green superpowers. Their diplomacy is not based on military threats, but on life-sustaining exports. The struggle for oil was replaced by the struggle for phosphorus, seeds, and unpolluted soil. These new centers of power began to form alliances, creating a global South coalition that dictated the terms of the new world. They rebuilt the internet using localized mesh networks and redesigned transportation around rugged, low-tech reliability. The climax: the new capital of humanity. The climax of this geopolitical shift occurred when the old powers made their final attempt to reclaim dominance. Desperate for resources, the remnants of the old world's military forces turned their eyes towards the thriving southern zones. But the new superpowers had already evolved. They did not fight with traditional armies, they fought with the environment and total economic exclusion. By controlling the only viable food sources and clean water reserves, the new leaders forced a total surrender of the old guard without firing a single shot. The symbolic moment of this transition was the relocation of global governance. The crumbling halls of the United Nations in New York were abandoned, replaced by a new council in a bustling, sun-drenched city in the southern hemisphere. This was not just a change in location, but a change in philosophy. The New World Order prioritized ecological balance and domestic resilience over infinite growth. The era of the consumer was over. The era of the steward had begun. Conclusion: The lessons of the new sun. The rise of these new powers was not a matter of luck, but a testament to the endurance of fundamental human needs over artificial systems. As the ash finally began to clear, decades later, the world that emerged looked nothing like the one that preceded it. The scars of the past remained, but the leadership was different. The new superpowers proved that true strength lies in the earth beneath one's feet, and the ability to sustain life when the machines stop humming. The sun rose on a different world, casting long shadows over the ruins of the old, while lighting the path for the new architects of human civilization. The future belongs to the prepared, the resilient, and the few who knew how to grow in the dark.